Hello and welcome to The Sixth Sense. My name's Colin Fry and I'd like to invite you to join me as we try to draw the two worlds just a little bit closer together. Thank you very much for being here today. Let's see where the Spirit take me. I've got a gentleman trying to connect to me now, and it's quite important that I explain that as he's connecting to me, the feeling of wanting to explain that on the other side of life he is now perfect. That makes me feel, as he's trying to connect to me, that he had some impediment in earthly life. I feel as though our friend here was in some way mentally handicapped. I'm up here somewhere. Give me the feeling, give me the feeling. Yes, darling?
My granddad was in that sort of way.
Right, there was an incident or something happened and then thereafterwards he was handicapped thereafter. You can understand this, all right. Did your grandfather have something like an embolism or a blood vessel break in the brain that then left him handicapped afterwards?
Yeah.
There was this main incident, but thereafter he had two smaller embolisms that increased the severity of the condition. Yeah. Your mother became very upset in the latter part of his life because of a tube, like a nasal gastric tube that they passed down, and your mum became very, very upset over this. I'm sorry to have to put this in this way, my darling, but were they like force feeding him because he wouldn't eat properly?
Yeah.
He can look at all of this very objectively now because he's not like he was in those days. He was a very sharp, funny, witty man before he became ill.
Yeah.
I can tell. And my love, would you understand that he used to make up rhymes to make that made you all laugh?
Yes.
Okay. Your granddad is also showing me that he was extremely good at cribbage.
Yes.
A game that you never quite got the hang of.
Yeah.
All right. He's got a confession to make to you because I understand that he used to play with you. He's got a confession to make to you. The reason why you could never win was because he always cheated.
I gathered.
All right, okay. Darling, he would have great difficulty at times recognising and remembering who people were. He never had that problem with you. He always was able to recognise you. I know that was sad for your family, particularly mum, because often he wouldn't recognise your mum, but he always recognised you. My darling, did he have a sister or a sister-in-law that found it very difficult to cope with seeing him after he'd been taken ill?
Yeah.
She, you know, I'm sorry, I can't visit him. I just find it too much.
Yeah.
She doesn't need to be forgiven because he completely understands why she couldn't visit him, why she found it too distressing. Your mum is still with us, yes?
Yeah.
Because I feel as though there's something here for mum as well. Will you make sure that she is told that he has said, thank you for never giving up? He's just said she was, above all others, she was the one that always believed that inside all of that I was still there. He's back to normal, my love. I'll leave your granddad's love with you. God bless.
I was so happy to get a reading and so happy that it was my granddad, as I've really wanted to speak to him ever since he's passed on. My granddad was called Thomas Hoare. He was Deputy Lord Mayor of Canterbury for a while. He lived in Bridge and was an architect. He did many things for lots of people, and I think he was 87 when he passed away. It's taken me a long time to get over it, but it's very tear-jerking for me, so I almost did, but luckily held it back.
I feel as though our friend here in earthly life was in some way mentally handicapped.
He had a stroke which caused him to be paralysed on his right hand side, so he couldn't speak, he couldn't move, and was very difficult for him to communicate with us. And he was in a nursing home for about 5.5 years with it, so it was very difficult for us to see him all the time and very difficult for him to communicate, as I said before.
There was this main incident, but thereafter he had two smaller embolisms that increased the severity of the condition.
My granddad actually had 3 strokes, but the main one, he had one about a year or so before the major one. And I was at primary school at the time, and we were at a school disco, and we had my cousin with me who only lived around the corner, so we drove him back and found out then that he'd been taken into hospital. But Colin mentioned that there was 3, and the last one was what sort of finished him off, unfortunately.
Your mother became very upset in the latter part of his life because of a tube. Were they like force feeding him?
He went into hospital the day before my birthday, and basically they were having to feed him through a tube, but in the end they had to take that off because he just couldn't keep anything down, and it upset my mum because I found out this year that he actually starved because of it, which was very hurtful for a lot of us, and really did tear up the family for a bit. So it was very horrible ending really to his life, unfortunately, but to know that he's okay now is fantastic.
He always was able to recognise you.
We used to go see him on a Sunday, and he did have trouble recognising my mum and my gran sometimes, although she went every day. I was the only grandchild out of 7 of us that went almost every Sunday to see him, and he always recognised me. Always. I'm the youngest of the 7, so for some reason he just managed to recognise me every single time I went to see him, which was fantastic.
Did he have a sister or a sister-in-law that found it very difficult to cope with seeing him?
That had to be my sister, who found it very difficult. I mean, most of my family found it very difficult to go and see him, and especially my sister. She just couldn't bring herself to go and see him in the state that he was in. And to know that he understands that and that he's forgiven her, and there was nothing there to forgive in the first place really, but just to let her know is fantastic, and I'll pass it on to her when I get home, just to let her know.
Your granddad is also showing me that he was extremely good at cribbage.
I could never beat him. Under any circumstances, I could never beat him. I always had the suspicion that he was cheating, but never mentioned anything because he was my granddad and just didn't do that. But finding out today that he did is just confirmed my suspicions, so it was quite nice to find that out.
I feel as though there's something here for Mum as well. Thank you for never giving up.
When Colin told me the message from my granddad from my mum, I was very pleased with that because she needs reassurance. Ever since my granddad's been passed on, I've noticed she's been slightly different, and I don't think she's ever really got over it, especially as my grand's now taken ill. And the fact that she did always know that deep inside, aside from how he looked when he was in the nursing home, that he was always still the same old granddad and father to her underneath, and the fact that he's thanked her for sticking by him because she did a lot for him when he was alive, and I think she's going to be rapt when I tell her.
I'll leave your granddad's love with you.
To hear from him again after not being able to hear from him for so long, it can't describe it. There's no words that I can say to explain it. It's just an amazing feeling for me.